Welcome to Session 6, Financial Management and Fiduciary Responsibility. Governance and fiscal oversight is an essential role of the board. Specific fiduciary activities of the board include setting policy, oversight and monitoring, measuring progress, risk management, approving the budget, monitor and enforcing the auditing process, drive the organization's growth, and legal compliance. Nonprofits are not owned by shareholders, nor do they intend to earn a profit to distribute back to shareholders. Instead, nonprofits seek to earn revenue to support their program activities which are related to their mission. The mission is the key driver for nonprofits, not a return of profit or its shareholders. Financial statements are key components in revealing the financial health of an organization. Financial statements that you should be aware of as a board member include the Statement of Financial Position. The nonprofit balance sheet is also commonly referred to as a Statement of Financial Position or Statement of Financial Condition. This statement is based on the accounting formula assets equal liabilities plus net assets. The balance sheet offers the best overall perspective on the nonprofit's financial health and stability. In particular, readers evaluate the relationship of assets to liabilities for a nonprofit. The statement of activities is often referred to as the income statement since the term is more commonly associated with for-profit companies and earnings. The nonprofit statement of activities follows the basic formula: revenues less expenses equals the change in assets. The nonprofit statement of activities shows the funds coming into the organization less the cost of operating the organization. The statement of functional expenses is only used by nonprofit organizations based on the importance of monitoring expenditures. In general, this statement breaks down organizational expenses into common categories. This breakdown helps the nonprofit track how it spends its money. Finally, the statement of cash flows is the statement that presents operating, investing, and financial activities to show the sources and uses of cash. One of the key roles that nonprofit boards have is in nonprofit budgeting. So let's take a closer look at what nonprofit budgeting is. The process of building a budget is fundamentally a planning process. A budget is a financial document that provides an overview of how an organization is planning to spend its money. It is essentially the financial reflection of what a nonprofit business expects to accomplish over a 12-month period. As a nonprofit board member, you have to be aware of two different kinds of budgets: operating budget and a capital budget. The operating budget reflects the organization's planned financial activities for the year ahead, showing how much revenue it expects from which sources and how much it will spend on operations. It's a key tool in effectively and efficiently achieving the organization's stated purpose, and it should always align with the organization's strategic plan. The operating budget must be centered around the primary goals and objectives of the organization. The capital budget may include projects which will have ongoing effects on operations. The capital budget can also be used for construction and other big one-time spending projects that often take more than a fiscal year to pay for. The board's role in nonprofit budgeting include establishing general budget policies, formally reviewing and approving the budget, and regularly reviewing financial and narrative reports on budget implementation and planning for any needed corrective action. One of the most important roles for the nonprofit board is financial oversight. Through effective financial oversight, the board assures the public at large that all resources and benefits received are used to support the nonprofit's mission. According to BoardSource, there are 6 steps to improve board financial oversight. The first Recruit financial expertise. A board that lacks financial expertise is financially illiterate. Every board must have at least one superstar member who, at a minimum, knows how to read financials, develop and monitor budgets, and manage cash flow. The second is to have an active financial committee. This committee should do most of the heavy lifting in terms of budget development, creating financial policies, and the day-to-day financial monitoring and oversight. The committee must alert the entire board to financial issues, provide objective financial reporting at each meeting, and ensure that financial information provided is transparent and accessible. The third is financial policies. Another important oversight tool is the financial policies document. These policies are developed jointly by staff and the Finance Committee. However, they are approved by the entire board. Number 4 is the audit. Whether to audit or not to audit, that is the question. For many smaller organizations, the cost of obtaining an audit may far outweigh the benefits. However, before foregoing audits altogether, it's important to remember that some funders, especially governments, require audits. The auditor must be vetted and hired by the board. Financial statements. Usually, a review of financial statements is part of every board meeting. The following financial information, at a minimum, must be included in the board packet: statement of financial position, statement of activities, cash flow projection, current annual budget. The sixth and final step is board financial training. Most likely, not all board members will feel comfortable or competent interpreting financial statements or conducting a budget review. Thus, it's important that financial literacy training be provided to members in regular doses. Indicators of financial health of your organization. Adequate operating reserves. Operating reserves are calculated from the statement of financial position as follows: unrestricted, undesignated net assets less net fixed assets, such as property, equipment, net of depreciation, and net of any borrowing secured by fixed assets. A financially healthy organization should have regular review of budget to actual expenses and revenue. The budget is a board-approved planning tool to guide the organization on where and how to spend to achieve the organization's mission. Regular review at a minimum every quarter or expenses compared to the budget allow leaders to either course correct and adjust spending. Maintaining a surplus, covering operating expenses, and contributing to reserve is a sign of a healthy organization. While deficit spending may at times be necessary, especially for planned major expenses, care should be taken to finance the spending through borrowing funds, tapping into operating reserves, and reliance on special fundings to cover the deficit. Timely financial reports. While there is always some delay between financial reports and their availability to leadership due to internal processes, care must be taken to limit the delay. At a high level, the organization's leadership must have regular understanding of where the organization is on both revenue and expenses. Expense recovery. Understanding your organization's full cost is essential to proper pricing. When you know the full cost of the operations that you're doing, you can make sure that you are getting resources to cover that adequately. While separation of duties, adherence to organizational policies and procedures can sound rather dull, however, internal controls are key towards any risk management process by providing reasonable assurances that financial reports are reliable and applicable laws and regulations are followed. Now, let's hear from an expert, Tim Shupik, about financial health and your role as a board member. Okay, thank you for joining us for the session 6, Financial Management and Fiduciary Responsibility. And we have with us Tim Shupik, CPA for Shupik and Associates. Welcome, Tim. Could you kind of start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your role and your experience with boards and board service?
Sure. I'm old, so I've been around for about 40 years and had the opportunity to serve on a number of boards, a number of nonprofit boards in particular. That's generally what we serve on. Not just nonprofit charitable boards, but things like the Chamber of Commerce, which are nonprofits, but not necessarily charitable. Um, but uh, but much of my board experience has been with places like the United Way, Habitat for Humanity, um, crisis intervention, homeless shelter, etc. So those are, and that's what most people get an opportunity to serve on. They're all pretty similar in what their financial goals are and uh, what they need to look out for. So, and they typically ask an accountant to get on there just for that reason sometimes. And also just the diversity of an accountant as well as other professions. So,
Um, can you tell us a little bit about the board's role in financial management and the fiduciary responsibility that they have when they're on the board?
yes, well, from my perspective, I think at least reviewing the financial statements on a quarterly basis and trying to understand, the budget, how that relates to the budget. So hopefully the financial statements are prepared so they can actually, look at a line item budget and compare it. Um, the financial viability of these nonprofits are somewhat tenuous sometimes, depending on how much money they have and how much money they can raise. And so, keeping an eye on the budget, not just the expenses, but also the revenue items are, that's kind of foremost. Many times, the treasurer's report is the first, maybe the second or third item in the agenda almost each meeting. And that's it's high priority. Hopefully most people just don't pass on it. A lot of times it is a consent thing because you can't do too much about it, but you still should understand what's in the financials and how it relates to the operations. Um, as you get higher in the board positions, becomes more important because you have to actually set the budget many times with the help of the director. Um, so what else? I can't think of.
So, what are some of the basics that a board member should know about the financial management of a nonprofit organization?
Well, unfortunately, it is, we get on boards because a lot of times we like the organization, the help, it makes you feel good to help other people. But it kind of comes down to where, you got to run like a business as well. And so you take a look for you got sources of revenue, the cash in the bank. Those are some of those important things for boards to focus on and see, is that money being collected, or are the funds being raised or the grants being written to bring those money in. um, I don't know if I'm answering your question on
No.
point, but it's really, to me, the expenses for many boards or for many operations are pretty well set in stone. Not much you can change other than staff changes and things like that. Um, but the revenue sources are the ones that fluctuate the most, and that's the hardest one to secure and to wrap your arms around. So
What?
go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So, what are some ways that board members can identify financial issues? You kind of mentioned that a lot of organizations, especially nonprofit ones, are their finances can be tenuous sometimes because of the nature of nonprofit.
So what are some ways that board members can identify, potential red flags before they become a crisis?
Well, again, that's what the financial statements will help you with. Updated cash position is key. We try to, we would like to get most nonprofits to at least this 3 to 6 month reserve in the bank. It sounds like a lot of money to sit there doing nothing, but we don't know what's going to happen. That's going to deplete those funds fairly quickly. So, it looks like a lot of money sometimes sitting there, but if it's not there, then you don't have anything to fall back on, and that should be a primary goal, to get to that. If you don't see a reserve in the bank account, that's something they should work on. Nonprofits should work on. I hate to make it sound like it's money all the time, but that's kind of what we focus on. Again, that's the only way to. The money is really the only way to meet the purpose of the organization, frankly.
Mm-hmm. I always say money equals programs.
Yes.
Programs help people. So, and it's important to keep your eye, as a board member, to keep your eye on, to have multiple eyes on the finances of an organization to make sure that it's financially sound so services can always continue. What questions should a board member be asking about an organization's finances, budgets, etc., when they're either maybe thinking about joining a board or they just first join the board? What kind of things should they be provided right away in terms of the budget or in finances?
Well, it's certainly not a bad idea to even show them a budget, but the question would be, how do you raise your money? How much do you expect to raise? How much, what program, or what events or grants, or how do you raise your money? Different organizations raise it differently. Some of them have scheduled events that, I think of NIVIC, and they have Dancing with the Dream.
Mm-hmm.
They also get government grant. Lots of places get government grants, or they have, program revenue in a way. Selling Girl Scout cookies would be that kind of thing. But others are just, asking for money, or those kinds of, campaigns like the United Way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for the board member to understand where those sources of revenue come from, and how does that fit with, maybe, because a lot of times the board member should be willing to help with that, one way or the other, either through direct donation or just help campaign or whatever the fundraising activity is. But that's one of the key things. And then, of course, again, the overall budget should tell them how the money is being spent. They could probably make a guess that there's rent being paid and utilities and those kinds of things, salaries, etc. But
So this program that we're doing, the board orientation leadership development, is really aimed at people who may have never served on a board and are wondering what all of that kind of entails. And so if you had a message for someone who's thinking about board service, why they should maybe pursue that volunteer path.
Might have to edit this one. I'm trying to think on. That's a good question. You would hope that people don't get on the board to build a resume. If you're going to commit to it, there's been kind of an old rule of thumb. I don't know if it's still there, but if you're going to be a board member, you need to kind of commit a dollar figure to donate to the organization you're helping. But then there's a time element to it as well. And you need to commit both time and treasure. Um, you know, that they can't take these board, uh, being on the board lightly. And that's, anyway, that, I don't know if that answers the question or
So
not. to be honest.
why have you spent a lot of your time serving on boards?
You know, that's a good question. My first real involvement in any board was the United Way. I got involved pretty early, as back in the day. They were called, what were they called? Loaned executives.
Mhm.
And we made, not just me, but many of us would go around and do campaigns at Lehigh at 7 o'clock in the morning to talk to the, that group that was coming on board at that time, at that shift. Or we'd go to Mercy and do it, and talk to, 20 people and basically tell the United Way story. And so that got me involved in the United Way, and I got on their board and all that. And then other opportunities came along, and it was a good organization I liked. It's part of giving back to the community for me. It was like I have many clients in my community. I always thought, in the United Way in particular, that mostly but for the grace of God, go I, right? I could be on the receiving end and of some of and I'm not, thankfully, yet, but who knows? I could. So I just I give back because I do have that time, I guess, and I don't, I think even a little bit helps, even if I don't have any particular talent. I remember when I was on the Crisis Intervention Board, I felt like a duck out of water. I had no clue what was going on. They had their program was beyond what I could understand, because I just don't, but I did what I could to help with the finances and that kind of thing. That's all I usually could do. So, it's giving back to the community, because a lot of, that's where I get my business too. So,
Mhm.
and so a lot of businessmen do that because they feel like they need to give back. Anyway.
Well, we really appreciate your time taking to talk to us a little bit about, the financial management of nonprofits and the fiduciary responsibility that board members do have when they take on that board member role. Um, and so this is really helpful to just kind of introduce people into that branch of volunteer service that sometimes people don't really think about. And so we really appreciate your time, Tim.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thank you.